Hello, David. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, Herschel. Thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Great stuff. David, before we start, do you have a favorite quote, something that motivates you, inspires you, you would like to share with our audience?
Well, I will do that as I'm a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, and there have been certain quotes and experiences I've had in my training as well as in my practice. I've been in practice for 40 years now, specializing on families under stress. But one of my favorite quotes, which taught me so much, actually, I'm thinking of two. I'll share both of them. As a student, a doctoral student, I had a professor, a blind psychologist. It was very interesting. He did research on the psychology of the blind. And the interesting thing is that he was the sharpest guy I ever met. I mean, he really, really was. And he taught a course on history of psychology, which was kind of a throwaway course in the doctoral program, but I found it fascinating. And the most fascinating thing is that he started not with modern psychology, but he went all the way back to the Greeks. And he realized that what he shared with us is that we are still asking the same questions about psychology as the Greeks did thousands of years ago. What is mental illness? What is psychotherapy? What is cure? And we're still asking those questions. There are hundreds now of different approaches to those questions, all kinds of what I would call bandwagons of different, trains of thought about how to treat people, And I use the term bandwagons because somebody comes up with something and everybody sort of jumps on it and says, well, that's the answer.
Hmm.
But there is no one answer. And that's one of the things you learn as you mature as a therapist is that everybody is different. And you can't just use some sort of a cookbook approach to any particular person or situation for that matter when you're dealing with families and children.
Hmm.
So
Right.
that taught me, and I still appreciate two things. One is how being able to withstand, if you will, or hold on to the anxiety of not knowing, of uncertainty. And that leads to being able to being creative when you're doing psychotherapy and dealing with families and children and adults. So that has really helped me in my career as far as really helping people understand what's going on for them and what to do about it.
Indeed, indeed. And thanks for sharing that, David. So, David, before we jump directly into the modern day relationship challenges, I want to understand more about your story. Imagine this: you are in a room full of ambitious young people, right? Couples, straight, gay, lesbian, whatever you can imagine in the new modern world, and no one knows your name, no one knows what you do, but you have the stage for a couple of minutes, right?
Hmm?
Where you with what you will start as your life story and explain why people should trust what you have to say. What would be your story?
Well, not to get too personal, but one of the things that I lacked in growing up was being able to communicate with my parents. All right. My mother uh, was non communicative. I think she might have either been depressed or even had Asperger's. And as a child, of course, I didn't know. I'm talking about in reflection. And my father was always away. He was either he ran a business and he was gone even on weekends. And then he would take his relaxation by bowling and cards and golf. And so he was gone a lot. And so I was sort of left on my own. Uh, I had siblings. I was the middle child, and but we didn't really communicate emotionally in my family. And so I first started in college. I was a psychology major, but I was more interested in the research end of it. And I did research, believe it or not, on the neuroendocrinology of the brain, and
Hmm.
was actually successful. Was first author on a paper that I presented to the endocrinology, excuse me, endocrinology convention in New York City when I was 24 years old, and I was tell you the truth, I was scared to death to address 300 people who knew a lot more about endocrinology than I did. But the project happened to be successful. We actually succeeded in determining uh, what impacts the sexual differentiation of the brain. I won't go into the details of that, but that was very successful. And from there, I I actually had a grant to continue that education, but I got tired of the lab. I needed more personal contact. And so, when the grant ran out, I volunteered at a state hospital for adolescents. And I learned and got supervision there. And from that experience, I went on to become a counselor at a foundation in Philadelphia. And I did that for a couple of years. And I realized this is what the kind of work I really wanted to do. So I applied to graduate school in clinical psychology, and I got accepted, and I got into a good program, and 4 years later, got my doctorate, did a postdoc at University of Cincinnati psychiatry, and then started opening up a practice. Was a medical director at a clinic, things like that. So I learned a whole lot in my training, but I learned infinitely more in my experience. As I matured as a therapist, seeing patients, seeing families, seeing children, understanding the impact of child development on the ability to communicate, especially emotional communication, and realized how many assumptions people were making when they try to communicate emotionally, how many things got in the way of doing that well. And that's what I've sort of dedicated my practice to, teaching parents how to communicate with each other and with their children at different stages of development, how to develop what I've called a common emotional language with your child. So
Interesting.
that kind of brings us up to date as far as that. The creativity and the science of psychology is the thing that keeps my interest. It's never the same. It's always something to know, to learn, and I would try to impress that as far as my background. Now, in talking to a crowd of ambitious, you know, type A personality, perhaps, couples who, my guess is the couples are there because of their own concerns about how they communicate, or concerns about their children, concerns about the pressures they're under, you know. And so I would begin to talk to them about, first of all, I begin to talk to them about the pressures they're under because they can relate to that. Financial pressures, two income families, social media, not being able to have any real personal space sometimes. And that one's kind of a big one because in the olden days before social media and laptops and cell phones, you could leave work at home. I mean, at the office, excuse me, and not bring it home. Now we have no personal space. We can always be gotten in touch with. There's our computer. We have to get work done in the evening to keep up. Two incomes, which means both mom and dad are busy. The children are now being, not neglected, but there's no time to just sit down with them. And I can see people's heads going, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then they'll say, oh, but I do this and I do that. But the idea is how you do it and what place you're in emotionally so you can really help your children to develop emotionally. Yeah. Just, it's great to go out and kick a softball or kick a soccer ball with your son, but it has to be done regularly and you have to be able to talk to him about it. And what I see in modern couples oftentimes is the electronic babysitter. They're so busy, with their own careers and their own stresses and whatever might be going on, and have very little time to themselves, that they sit their children in front of a screen. And, it's convenient, but there's no socialization involved. The children are not learning to socialize. When I was a child, which is a while ago now, there was no such thing as a play date. And I can see the audience saying, no, play date? We didn't have to arrange for a play date. Everybody was outside on the street playing with one another. There was always a parent around. We could always we can always duck into somebody's house,
Hmm.
but now the streets are considered unsafe, which is possible, depending on where you live. And, we have to arrange for our children to see other children. We have to arrange for this. And it doesn't fly oftentimes. And the children would rather be overstimulated by a screen than socialize. And that has some very severe consequences that we can go into. I would go into with the
What
children,
what would
with
be
their
your
parents, excuse me.
what would be your advice? See, I totally get that what you're saying here, because the thing is, in the modern world, especially in the modern parenting world, the parents are not just concerned about their kids' mental health, but they're also concerned about their security. And the reason why I'm saying that is we have to be looking after our kids around like where they're going and playing, whom they're playing with, what kind of environment they're playing in, and things like that. And that creates this kind of bubble. So, for example, most of the kids nowadays, especially from the families who have both the parents working, they go to the creches. The crèche costs them more than one person's salary in a month in modern world in
Mhm.
developing countries, right? But they still do it. The reason they do it because they want somebody to take care of the kid while they're working so that they can money for that same job. Now what happens afterwards when they come back home, they if they want to feed them, if they want to play with them or any activity, let's say for example if they want to feed them, if you don't give them a mobile phone with a YouTube cartoon music playing on it, or put that cartoon on the TV, they will not eat. They don't eat. They just shout, they have their own tantrums, things like that. What would you suggest, being in their shoes? You know, they're humans too. They're working. They are tired too, but they have kids. What would be the best solution to solve this modern day issue in relationships with kids?
Predictable time, in a phrase. And I mean that in two different ways. Limit your children's time on the screens in a predictable way. Right? They may not like it, but if you start that way, they'll never get used to always being in front of a screen. So they'll be more tolerable of it. Okay. Predictable time also with your children, away from the screens. All right. Uh, when my son was growing up, my predictable time, I knew, my busy schedule, having a practice, etc., etc. If I did not plan times with my son, they would not happen, especially since sometimes I'd have to see people in the evening. So when he was, you like stories, I'll tell you another one if that's okay, Herschel.
Sure.
When he was in preschool, I went to pick him up once and he was smiling at me and he says, Dad, I got into a fight and I won. You got into a fight and you won? Yeah, Dad, got into a fight and I won. Me and this other boy hid behind the building and we got in a fight and I won. I didn't want him to become a bully, obviously. That was not what I wanted. And I realized, what can we do to combine the learning experience of not being a bully and having time with my son? So since he had an interest in fighting per se, we both got into doing Taekwondo together. 3 times a week, we would go to a parent-child class in Taekwondo. And we did that for 5 years together from the age of like 4 or 5. And at 10, I was his black belt instructor and promoted him to being a black belt. And this was a wonderful experience because the martial arts teaches respect. It teaches you, first of all, not to fight unless you absolutely have to. And it also teaches you respect, not just for the higher belts, the higher ranking people, but the lower ranking belts. All right. And so this was a very good experience for my son to learn to respect not just older people, but people who are not as talented as he was, perhaps. And this was an important part of the training. Humility is an important part of the training in any martial art. That's why you're not supposed to wear your belts outside of the school because it's bragging. Look at me, I've got a green belt, I've got a brown belt, things like that. So the humility part of martial arts I thought was very helpful for my son and for me. And it was a great, experience for us to click together, to bind. There are, and I'll segue into something that the parents should know out there because it relates to this. The self-psychology literature, self-psychology being a branch of psychoanalytic thinking, okay, that there are two types of experiences that first build and then maintain self-esteem, okay? The first is called a mirroring experience. And this, I'll give the parents something they can relate to again. Your 3-year-old makes a finger painting, right? What do they do with it? Do they go, gee, I did a great job? No, they don't. They'll take it, they'll walk up to their parent, they'll hold it in front of their chest and say, look what I did, Mom, look what I did, Dad. Any parent can relate to this. And the important thing is what happens in the very next moment. And that is this. They look up at your face. Look what I did, look what I did. And they look up at you. And of course, the natural response would be, gee, that's great. That's beautiful. It could be the biggest mess in the world, but gee, that's great. That's beautiful. And you stick it up on the refrigerator, right? And then you smile at them, they'll smile back. And what I call is what they're getting from you is that gleam in your eye. Now, you repeat this with the finger painting, the first report card, the trophy. As the child gets older, they internalize that gleam in your eye. And that is the basis of what we call confidence, which is part of self-esteem. The second experience, and again, parents really want to know this because it tells them what they need to do with their children, you know, to help their self-esteem, build it. The second experience is called a merger experience. And the psychobabble name of it is merger with the idealized other. And people would look at me and go, huh, what's the idealized other? Well, you're the idealized other. Children at a young age realize that you're bigger, smarter, better, faster, stronger than they are. And they'd like to be like you, but they can't. The closest they can get is to do something with you. This is the little boy who pushes a toy mower when dad's mowing the lawn. This is dad as a coach, your mom as a coach, you know? Now, and by sharing these experiences, the child learns a sense of that I can do things. And called a sense of competence. And those are the two parts of self-esteem, confidence and competence. And we never outgrow the need for those types of experiences. The merger experience, for instance, um, well, the mirroring experience, first of all, would be your job evaluation. I mean, you know how sensitive we are about our job evaluation as a reflection of us, and it'll either give us confidence in what we're doing at work or not. You know, the merger experience as an adult is a mentor. If you've ever had a mentor, somebody who's very special to you, and if they're proud of your work, they don't do the work for you, but if they're proud of what you've done, you feel really good about yourself because you feel confident. So these are lifelong experiences, and if you don't get them, if you'll notice, and this is what's important to the parents, if you'll notice, both of those experiences start externally. A child can't mirror themselves or have merger with themselves. And if they don't get those experiences, first of all, their self-esteem gets hurt, but mostly they keep looking outwardly for that mirroring and for that merger. They don't internalize it,
But
which
what,
means
what,
they're
but,
always looking for others to praise them.
but don't you think it's incentivizing what we are trying them to do? Um, for example, you are giving someone incentives to do what you think is the right thing to do. Doesn't that cribs their creativity? For example, let's say I go to my brother's place. He has a 6 month old toddler, but then he also has a 4 month year old younger boy, right? He doesn't eat properly his meals, right? Every time we want to feed him, either he has to be in front of the TV watching cartoon or some kind of song. If we close the TV, he cries. He, does all the tantrums. On the other hand, I took him for an activity outside home one day on a weekend where we have these kids zone. It's a place where they jump around on the
I
trampoline
know
and
what a kid's
everything.
zone is. Yeah, we
Yeah.
have them too. Yeah.
And he played there for like, I don't know, 90 minutes or something. And
With
then
other
the moment,
kids.
yeah, with other kids. And then he got out and he's like, Uncle, I'm hungry. And suddenly, the person I wanted to feed, he was not eating anything. He was ready to eat anything. And I had nothing in the car. So I gave him a it wasn't a chocolate, it was like made of a fruits chocolate, right?
Okay.
And he ate it within like, I don't know, 1 minute or something. And I created a video for his dad saying, "Look, he's eating without being in front of the TV." But if we incentivize this attitude, do you think at some ethical level we are doing it wrong, or is it perfectly fine to promote good behavior?
Well, what you did, you didn't promote good behavior. You met a certain emotional need that your nephew had,
Mm.
right? Which was the need to get out and be active, to get a different kind of stimulation, because those places are quite stimulating, obviously,
Yeah. Yeah.
and also the socialization, which is a very necessary part of his emotional growth as well. And so that was more important and available finally to him because you took him someplace else to get it. What you're teaching your brother, is it? Your brother? About his kids, is that this is what he really needs emotionally, not just stimulation in front of a screen. He needs stimulation, but the right kind of stimulation. And you're not giving it to him by sitting him in front of a screen, because without it, there's a lack of stimulation. There's something called temperament, Herschel. Okay, there's the psychology of the temperament. Temperament is basically what you're innately born with, parts of your personality that you're just born with. And there are different dimensions of temperament. And one of them is how much stimulation we need to feel okay. And you see this even in infants, that you're born with it. Some children need a low degree of stimulation, right? And so in a baby, if there's too loud of a noise or there's too much going on, they'll cry. Some children need a high degree of stimulation, all right? So they'll be okay with the loud noises, perhaps. And if they don't get enough stimulation, this is one of the theories of why children suck their thumb, for the stimulation, right?
Mm.
And then there's the middle between low and high, called slow to warm up, where some children initially can't handle the stimulation, but they get used to it. Now, your nephew may be a high stimulation child just by his temperament. Oftentimes, bright children need a lot of stimulation, okay?
Mm.
But that's not always the case. It's a separate thing, temperament and intelligence. But so I don't want to just imply that if you need a lot of stimulation, you're intelligent. That's not the case. But so what your brother needs to learn is you have a high stimulation child. He's going to be acquisitive. He wants input. What kind of input does he need? He needs time with you doing something together. That's the merger. That would stimulate him. He needs other kids to play with, and an activity to do with them. I'll give you another story if you wish.
Sure, sure. Go on.
My son was, I think he was about 10, and he invited a friend over, his friend John, to come over to play video games. He wasn't big into video games, but John was, and so we had a couple, all right?
Mm.
As soon as John got to our house, we had a thunderstorm, and the electricity went, no video game, right? So what are they going to do? There's no lights in that. We light candles, and we pulled out a Monopoly board, the game Monopoly, and they spent 2 hours or something, because that's a long game, by candlelight playing Monopoly. And then John went home later and etc. And my son came in and said, Dad, that was the best time I've had with John ever.
Wow.
You see what I mean? And he learned from that. I mean, that's a learning experience. As a psychologist in me, I asked him, because he was already 10, I said, what do you make of it? My son's name is Seth. What did you make of it, Seth? I like that. I want to do more stuff with other people. He was on teams. He learned Taekwondo, which was in a class. I made sure he got this type of socialization. He went on to get himself a job at the age of 11. Another part was teaching him responsibility. So I started him as on a allowance cleaning the cat litter box at the age of 5. So he learned he had to work to get money, because I just didn't give him. In fact, I tell parents, to successful parents, I'm segueing here, I'm sorry, but I tell parents, because I'm serious about this, you're successful, you have money, don't give money to your kids as a present. Make
Mm.
them earn something. Give them a toy, give them this, but don't give them money, because that de-incentivizes them to go out and, work for something. And my
Give me.
son, when he turned 11, he became a caddy at a local country club and earned hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars as a caddy, because he was incentivized, to use your word, to earn
Mm.
money, because he wanted to buy this and he wanted to buy that. And I said, fine, go do it, and he's still a very enterprising man. He's a man now, of course. Go ahead. I'm
No, I
going
was
on
I was
here.
just asking, what's the best? So you're saying that no money, okay, that's fine. What else? Give us some examples so that our
Uh,
listeners who are parents, they know exactly, okay, this is right. Obviously, money is wrong, so instead of money, this is the better way.
okay. On that point. Okay. Well, one of the things that I did, even with my son, is if you're going to buy them something, make them chip in. Okay. Have them earn some money and make them chip in so they have an investment in what you're getting them. For instance, my son at the age of about 11 or 12, middle school, he got into Abercrombie and Fitch clothes because that was cool. So he wanted a jacket, right?
Mm.
And the jacket was like $100, and a regular jacket was $50. So I told him, look, I'll give you the $50 for a regular jacket, but you're working now. You're earning some money as a caddy. You put in the other $50. And he
Mm.
said, okay. So he did. And 3 days later, after we bought it, the zipper came out of it. I'm not going to comment on the quality of the clothes, but the zipper came out of it.
Yep.
And he was mad, you know. So we went back to Abercrombie and Fitch and got him another jacket. And the zipper came out of it.
Mm.
And I said, what do you make of it? I'm not buying that stuff. You know, he had an investment in it, you know. So he said, no more Abercrombie and Fitch. And I didn't have to lecture him on all the, you know, you don't need
Yeah.
fancy schmancy clothes and it's just a brand name, blah, blah, blah. He learned it on his own, you see. And that's the kind of experiences that parents need to avail their children. He, at $5 a week at the age of 8, he saved $120 to get himself a Walkman. Remember Walkman? They put a little disc in them and they had earphones. And I
Yeah.
went to the store beforehand and talked to the clerk because I'm a psychologist, you know. I said, look, when I bring my son in, first of all, what's a decent one? He said, okay, this one's a decent one. Second, don't talk to me. Talk to my son. All right? Deal with him, you know. And that's exactly what happened. And he was so proud of that Walkman because he earned it. And, you know, and he had an investment in it. So this is what you know, we're talking a developmental important lesson here. You work for something, you earn something. And I see so many children and teenagers, especially, who are basically indulged. Give me $30, Dad. Here's $30. You know, here's, you know, this type of thing that they have no incentive to go out and work at McDonald's or something like that and earn, you know, $12 an hour or whatever it might be because they've got money
Mm.
and they're just handed things that they want, you know. And the result of that is really not good because what you're developing there is what later becomes high maintenance people. They expect people to do for them, you know. And, you know, in the worst case scenarios, there's a term called infantilization, where they feel like they can't do anything on their own. This is usually families with family money. You want a Porsche, I'll buy you a Porsche. You know what I mean? That type of family. And they come to see me because they're depressed because they have nothing to aspire to.
Mm.
They have some nothing job, perhaps, or working for the family or whatever it might be. And they know they can never. You see, one of our needs, and I'll tell you this because the parents, well, the high up functioning parents will understand this. Our view of success is often status related. Okay. If you were brought up in a 3-bedroom home, Herschel, if you have a 4-bedroom home, you feel like you're a success.
Mm.
See? Well, these families with all this money, they'll never be able to beat that. You know what I mean? And they're just going to be handed it anyway.
Mm.
And we need something to aspire to. You know, that's a human need in my opinion. Something to shoot for.
Mm.
You know, we shouldn't become type A obsessed with this type of thing because then you're not paying attention to your kid's emotional needs or your spouse's emotional needs. You're just providing this lifestyle. But we do need something to aspire to. And there's that balance that I would talk to these parents about because so often the word support gets really confusing in these types of situations. You know, mom's not happy, the kids aren't happy because dad's always working.
Mm.
And he says, how can you be upset with me? Look at the wonderful lifestyle I'm providing you. Look at the money, and we live in this big house, and we have nice cars and stuff like that. So they see supporting their family as financial support. The,
Mm.
the kids and the wife need emotional support. But where's the time for that? Where's the focus on that? This is where type A personalities, they're adaptive at work, but it's not adaptive at all at home.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. My I lost my grandfather recently, and he always used to say, "It's the first generation who struggles and get you on the first ladder, step of the ladder. Second generation who struggle more and make you wealthy, rich
Mm,
in your clan, right? The third generation who enjoys the struggle of your first and second generation, right? They spend money, they travel, they eat
mm-hmm,
food, they enjoy the thing. And it's the fourth generation who loses everything, and is the fifth again who does the struggle
Starts
again.
over again.
Yes, it's a cycle. It
Okay.
always happens. And the reason it happens is because the way we brought up our kids. Because the first generation who was struggling, the kids they saw the struggle of their parents. They saw how much hard work they did for so little. That's why they kept doing that to make wealth out of their hard and smart wisdom.
Hmm.
And then the third generation who was like enjoying that wealth realize, oh, you can enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, what's the point of it? Which is kind of a point of making wealth, to be honest. That if you don't enjoy the wealth, what's the point of
Yeah.
making health
Okay.
wealth? And then the fourth generation is helpless because so I come from India, from close to Mumbai, and I've been living in UK for more than almost 2 decades now. And when I go back to India in Mumbai, I see 13 years old, 14 years old, 15 years old teenagers in sitting in Starbucks and shopping in the malls, and they spend $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 on the in the malls to buy a dress and shoe. It's normal for them, right? It's normal. Why it's normal? Because I think they have access to that kind of capital.
Yes.
I make at least I make good money to go and buy these $1,000, $2,000 shoes, but I don't because I know the value of money. So I go and I buy like 100, max. That's like my
Hmm.
threshold. And I know that this
Hmm.
will work for me at least for a couple of years and I use it. But when I
Yes.
see my kids of my cousin brothers and sisters, obviously their parents are making a lot of money because they're in business and everything, but they're spending this money on these things and they get bored of these expensive things in 6 months and then they need
Hmm.
another piece of shoes or sneakers, right?
Yep.
So I talk to them and I say, what's happening here? Obviously, you are not paying attention to your kids because why would they do this kind of activity to please themselves, right? And then on the
Hmm.
other hand, I cannot say much because they're providing them everything whatever a father or a mother could provide to their kids. So it's a very dicey situation, and I don't want to make a judgment on the way they have raised their kids because it's none of my business. It's their own business. But in your opinion, you help quite a lot of parents. What's what's the ideal way? Let's imagine that you are helping somebody who has all the money in the world, right? But what's the ideal way to raise kids in this current world so that the kids are not paralyzed mentally?
That's quite a big question. And it's obviously it's going to have different, aspects to the answer, but to relate it to directly to your example, okay, Herschel, one thing I've already mentioned, which is start your child early earning things so they know that they have to work for something.
Mm.
Okay. The earlier, the better. I started the day when my son was 5 years old, cleaning the litter box. That's all he could really do. And I actually went to the toy stores to let you know and priced out some of the toys. And he was into, action figures that, a 5 year old would be into. And I saw that the small ones cost $5 at the time and the large ones cost $10. So I started him at $5 a week, which was an awful lot just for cleaning the litter box. And I told him I'd be adding things as he got older, taking out the garbage, things like that. But I did it on purpose so that he could get reinforced for what he earned within a week. Because a 5 year old can't wait a month for satisfaction, for the gratification. And if he wanted to wait 2 weeks, he could get the bigger one, the bigger toy. I did this absolutely on purpose so that he would learn, I can get a reward in a reasonable amount of time, something that I want, and I can then wait and get something even better. There's another experience with my son that this would also help the parents that you're talking about, right? When my son was, again, let's say 7 or 8, there were two boys who lived across the street from us, one a year younger, one a year older than my son, and they played together. Their father was, that family was wealthier, okay? And mom would go out in September and buy every popular new toy on the market, Christmas presents. And she was beating the market because those things would sell out, Tickle Me Elmos or whatever it was at the time. You know what I'm saying? All these. hot toys, and so these kids would get like 17 different toys for Christmas, right? And my son, I said, look, for Christmas, you were going to get one small one and one larger one. That's it. You can choose. He was into Transformers then, so a little Transformer and a bigger Transformer. So he got his presents and he was playing with them and everything. Then he went over across the street and, played with them. And he came back with a on his face. He was, hey, you know, how come they get like 17 toys and I only got two, right? You can see this. You're laughing because you know what I'm saying. And I looked at him, and I wasn't about to give him lecture number 3 on economy because what was he? He's 7. He's 8. He's not going to know. So again, with gaining wisdom, here's another phrase: gaining wisdom is processing your own experiences and learning from them. And that's what I wanted him to do, is to gain wisdom. So rather than lecturing him on, hey, they're spoiled, rotten, whatever you want to say, I said, okay, this is what you do, Seth. You wait 3 days and go back and play with the boys and come back and tell me what you see.
Hmm.
And he did it. And he came back 3 days and he said, Dad, I asked him, well, what did you see over there? He said, Dad, they don't even play with those toys. They're all just laying around. I said, well, do you play with your 2 toys? Yeah, I do. I really like them. But there it is. What do you make of it? Yeah, Dad. And that was the end of, how come they get more toys than I do? I mean, you see, because he learned from his own experience. And this is what I would share with these couples. And to do this stuff, you've got to take the time and have the presence of mind to do it. You can't be busy on your computer. You can't be wondering what tomorrow's going to be at work. You can't, be worried about this financial thing or, you know, uh, you get the point. That when you're so overwhelmed by the environment, you're in reaction mode, not response mode. And which means you're basically putting out the next fire, and then you go to the next fire. You're not helping your children to mature. You're not helping them to learn, to gain wisdom, and to become, the term is resilient, where the children can handle the stresses that they're under because they've gained confidence and sense of competence within themselves. So these are very important parts of parenting. They're essential to parenting, not providing just a lifestyle and the stimulation, et cetera, or the new toy to keep them occupied for a day. It's this, and we're losing that. And the the socialization is so important. Um, and I'll give you a terrible example, but I really think it's true. School shootings. We never had school shootings when I was a kid. Oh, there'd be a playground fight. That was about as bad as it got, you know. What's with this school shooting thing? Well, this is my own theory, and your listeners can make it what they will of it. There's a man named Donald Winnicott, who was a psychoanalyst from the 50s, who talked about the play space and what in a book called Playing in Reality, if people want to look it up. Um, And he talked about how the purpose of play for children is a way of approaching reality through the buffer of fantasy. What do children play at? Being a mommy, being a daddy, being a fireman, whatever it might be. They're playing at reality, but through the buffer of fantasy, because of course they could never handle the rigors of an adult role life. Now, an imagination is great, and to stay in that space is fine, but it can't be the only thing. Because what happens is if you have no reality, which means no socialization, it means if, socialization means if you're playing with a kid and you hit him, he's going to hit you back. There's some reality here. You have to learn to treat with people, that's socialization. If you don't have that, if you're just stuck in front of a screen and all you're doing is watching people get killed and then they pop up and the next person gets killed, and, what happens is if you're only doing that, the fantasy can start leaking into reality. You start looking at life as a game. And here's the example that was so terrible. It was in Newsweek many years ago on school shootings, the magazine Newsweek. And the one that always stuck with me is there was these 2 boys. I think they were like 9 and 10. And one of them got their dad's rifle. And then the other one went down. They were up on the hill. And the other one went down to the school at the bottom of the hill and pulled a fire alarm. So everybody started filing out of the school. And this kid started taking shots. And he killed like 7 kids and 2 teachers. And, it was terrible. Of course, they were arrested. And the cops got them. And they're just laughing. They have no recognition that what they did was so bad. And they were still like that. They finally took him to jail. And in the cell, they're just laughing, it was kind of fun. This is all in the article. I'm going, wow, finally, it was dinner time, right? And the jailer came around with a chicken dinner. And the kids turned to the jailer and said, we don't want chicken. We want pizza. And the jailer, of course, turned to him and said, kid, you're in jail. You're going to eat chicken and you're going to like it. They began to cry. It finally became real to them that this was no longer reality. This was this we're living in a fantasy. That's scary, you know. And when you plant your child in front of a screen, especially with these shoot 'em up games, where you kill somebody they just come back to life, you're not learning this, and it can leak into your reality. It's very necessary to have predictable time with your children, to have moments where they can learn and gain wisdom, like what I set up with my son with the Abercrombie and Fitch and the toys across the street. These are just examples of what parents need to do to help their children learn from their own experience. Their job is to help them to process it. What did you make of that? What do you think of it? What's that? What you're also doing is helping them to develop their own set of values by doing that. If you do this with young children, when they hit those teen years where there's all that peer pressure, right? You can turn to them when they say, "Oh, my friend Mickey, he he got drunk and ended up in an accident." Rather than saying, "Well, that's a terrible thing. You shouldn't do that." Give them lecture number 4. Because with a teenager, you do that, they're going to just shut you down anyway if they don't want to hear it. You say, "What do you make of it?" "Well, I don't think it was a good idea." "Why?" And let them tell you. And the last question being, how are you different than that? What would you have done differently? And now you're getting to insert their own values. And when you do that with a teenager, there's a hook that parents should use with their teenager. And the hook is this: younger children are geared to please their parents. So if they do something and they please you and they see that gleam in your eye, they're happy with themselves. And that motivates them to do it. Teenagers don't really care if they're happy with them. They really don't. They're more interested in their peers and etc. But what they are wanting is to be seen as growing up. So when a teenager says, "Well, I don't think I would have done that. I don't think I would have. If they started bringing out dope and stuff at the party, I think I would have left or called you up and come home." You turn to them and say, "The fact that you could reason it out that way really shows me that you're growing up." And they want to be seen as grown up, but now you're helping them to define what it means to be grown up. It's not going out and getting drunk, It's being responsible, having your own set of values that you assert in those situations. That's maturation. That's maturity right there. So these are the types of experiences. You're busy, you're ambitious, you want to get ahead and have a nice lifestyle for your family, but that's only a part of it. And it's not even the major part. You're a parent and you're a partner. Those needs are totally different than the lifestyle that you're providing.
Indeed, indeed. Thanks, David, for this wisdom. I really appreciate it. I know this conversation is going so well. I could talk to you like for hours with all these examples and stories, but the problem is we are limited with the time right now. And I also have to cover another section on our episode, which is the lightning round, where we got 6 quick fire questions for you.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you're ready, we can go into that. If you
Sure.
feel that one of the questions you don't want to answer, just give me a skip and then I'll go to the next one.
Like I told you, the anxiety of not knowing is part of your maturation as a therapist. I have no problem saying, I don't know. All right. So
Definitely, definitely. Great stuff. Cool. So, question number 1. What's the top 3 strategies in 2025 to become a successful parent when it comes to a relationship between you and your kids?
2 things. One, I mentioned a predictable time with your children that they can predict and you can predict. Time it's one-on-one with your child. If you have multiple children, still have one-on-one time with each child. All right. That's very important. And then what you do with that time, we've also covered. Having some sort of where they can learn from their own experience, where you can actually get them to express themselves safely. All right. Making it safe is a topic we haven't even gotten everywhere near close to talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's a very important topic. If your child doesn't feel safe in telling you stuff because of how you react to them, because you're in reactive mode rather than response mode, and don't bother me, I'm busy, I got to finish this project, they're not going to come to you. All right, with what they're feeling. Okay, so that's 2 things right there. But the other thing is something else. Your environment. You have to adjust your environment so that you can do what I just said. You've got to get away from the office stuff. You got to go, stop worrying about financial pressures. You've got to plan time with your kids, like what I did with the Taekwondo with my son. Regular time to be with my son. It helped his self-esteem. It helped him, gain wisdom. I learned what he was all about. I could help him develop an emotional language, which again that's another skill which we can't talk about right now. Okay. Those are the gist of it. I use the term a soothing presence. Obviously when somebody listens to you and understands you, that's a soothing thing.
Yeah.
But I don't say soothing person, I say soothing presence because the environment needs to be soothing. The
Definitely.
environment needs to, for both the parents and for the child. So the parent can do this for the child.
Thank you. Thank you for that. What book would you recommend to our audience and why?
Well, I have a book coming out, but that's kind of vain. And I should give you the title of that book so people know it. Can I do that now since we're
Sure.
talking
No
about it?
problem.
All
Yeah.
right. I always have to look it up because it's a name I keep. It's a big, long name. It's called Parent RX, like parent prescription, prescriptive wisdom, tips and strategies for communication with your child. Hopefully, it'll be out within the year. Okay.
Perfect.
But books that they can read, the basic book is way back from the 70s called Parent Effectiveness Training, which was
Mm.
Thomas Gordon's book on active listening. That's a good beginning. Learning how to listen. And one thing, if we ever do talk again, it'll be a whole hour on what gets in the way of actively listening to your children.
Mm.
Okay. What stops the process of them coming to you and telling you what's going on and what you can do to help them with that? That's a whole topic in itself that would take at least an hour to explain. All right.
Definitely. Definitely. And
So
I'm
you
sure.
start with that book. Um, there are so many parenting books out there. There's the book's called Love and Logic, which I find makes some sense, but they make too many assumptions, in my view, about what the child's capable of doing. The child needs to be able to develop to the point of being able to use what Love and Logic is offering. Love and Logic is very appealing because it's logical. But I hate to tell you, you're in an emotional relationship with your kids, and it's not going to follow logic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are a couple of things, but go on, ask your next question.
Great. What's one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful parent-child relationship?
Okay. I'll begin with something I just mentioned, being a soothing presence. A soothing presence is somebody, if you think about, Herschel, the people that you turn to when you're upset, for instance, we usually pick particular people, family members, a spouse, a friend, but invariably these people are okay when we're not.
Mm.
How that is helpful is this. A good listener is obviously okay when you're not okay. All right. Letting somebody get something from in here where it stays intense, out here verbally, where they can sort of borrow the okayness of the other person. And they can get what I call a safe emotional distance from what's bothering them. When it's in here, the analogy I use, I hope this is answering your question. The analogy I use is a forest for the trees. When the intense emotions are inside you, it's like your nose is right up against a tree, and the tree looks humongous, like there's no way around it, no possible solution. When you basically get it off your chest with somebody who's soothing by being a good listener and being okay themselves, you get a distance from that. I call it a safe emotional distance. And now you can see it's a significant tree, but that tree has boundaries, and there's other trees, and those other trees are the solution, you see? And so one thing, and what happens is if you can take on this mode with your children, children always want to come to you with their intense things if you make it safe this way, and you don't interrupt them by jumping in and just giving a solution or trying to distract them or trying to redirect them. Let them work it out. Let them come to you and tell you this stuff, all right? Because then you can come up with a solution with them. And that quietness, that soothing presence, they'll internalize. They'll take it in. This is how I deal with intense emotions. And there can be soothing presence for their own children. This is a wonderful legacy. All right.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Great. What's your favorite or personal productivity or tool or habit which helps building the relationship between your kid and you as a parent?
I'm being redundant here. The time with your child and how you use it. There's no magic, thing that you do with your kids. It's being there with them. That's the most important thing. There, to show you how sensitive it is, another example. Um, Again, Winnicott, he was a brilliant man, talked about being alone in the presence of another. The example is this: your 2 year old is sitting on the floor playing with his toys, and you're sitting on the couch right near them. You're not really playing with them. The child is not into parallel play yet. He's young, right? I mean, so, but okay, the phone rings in the other room. Mom gets up to answer the phone, and then all of a sudden you hear from the child in the first room going, "Mom, where are you?" Child needs your presence. Child, that's part of their security, you know? At a very, very early age, I'm talking about months,
Mm.
children cannot maintain the image of their parent for more than a few minutes in their mind. And if the parent is gone too long, they lose that image of their parent. And that's very frightening for a child.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, so I won't take it any further, but there's the gist of it.
Sure. And one of my favorite questions is, what's one of your most important passion outside of your work?
I told you I'm a ham. I already told you that. I'm a musician. That's my therapy, to tell you the truth. I play the guitar, the mandolin, the banjo, the octave mandolin, and I
Wow.
play Irish music. I play Celtic music on all those, and I collect what are called vintage instruments, guitars, mandolins, etc., banjos from the 20s and 30s, because that was sort of the golden age of American instruments, all right? And they're
Mm.
wonderful, all right? I pick up my little guitar that was made in 1929, and I play it. It's a wonderful, wonderful instrument, I'll tell you the truth. And I smile because
Mm.
it just sings to me. And the other thing I've done is musical theater because I love to sing. And I played Tevye and Fiddler on the Roof and Max Bialystock and the producers. And I love audiences. So I'll just get out there and if you ever do anything on stage, Herschel, if you're having a really good time, the audience is going to have a really good time. It
Yeah.
just comes across. So those are the things that help me personally, and the creativity, you know, writing arrangements and music and playing in 3 different bands. And, you know, uh, yeah, you ask me, that's what I like to do. And that's actually my therapy because it gets me out of myself
Definitely.
into a
Definitely.
creative passion.
Well, David, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your all inspiring stories, unpacking the strategies, tips, tricks for current world relationship with the kids for the parents. If people want to get in touch with you, if they have some questions regarding their own
Yes.
challenges, what's the best way to do it?
My email address would be the
Mhm.
best way. It's on my website, which I already said. It's at the bottom of the screen here, parentrx.org. And the email address is very simple. It's dsmarcus, PhD, all one word, at parentrx.org.
Mm.
I'll repeat it, dsmarcus, PhD, at parentrx.org. If you have any questions, I do some consulting work. If you wish to, consult on a particular situation, that's fine. That's the best way. They have questions about what we talked about. A lot of people ask me when the book's going to come out, for instance. And actually, some of the hosts have said, look, when the book comes out, you want to get back on the show. Those types of things to go with the book. But that obviously is up to you, Herschel, if you feel there's more that we
Sure,
can talk
sure,
about.
no problem.
But
Okay.
so that's it. That's what I can tell people.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspiring journey with your kid and the impactful work you're doing through your consulting service. It's been an absolute pleasure having you
Thank
on
you.
Relationship Lab podcast.
I, I've had a good time. You asked insightful, in-depth questions, which makes it easy for me because you're not getting off topic and stuff like that, which helps me because that can happen. It's easy to just go off on all kinds of tangents and be stuck on topic, and that was great. Thank you for that. Um, yeah,